Welcome to the Blueprint Podcast, where the blueprint to understanding a new and unified world is in our shifting consciousness. Now here are your hosts, Angela Blaha and Belia Person.
Hello there, gorgeous Angela. How are you?
I'm good, Belia. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I'm so excited we get to hang out. I know you and I both took some time off this past year to kind of figure out what the heck is going
Readjust.
on. Yeah, there you go. It was funny because they're like, oh, you were kind of off social media or kind of off grid. And then I remember somebody mentioning that you were off as well. I said, how funny. I was so worried about what I had going on that I didn't notice who else was taking time off. So I love that there's some things happening with us. And I very much appreciate the fact that we're going to get together and start sharing some things with the rest of the world for those that are ready to hear or want to know what's happening. I know for me, the time that I had off was a lot of self-reflection and figuring out who I wanted to create, who I wanted to be. And really just as you're always teaching us is to let go of like limiting systems or belief systems that are holding you back, that you really can't see yourself taking to the next level of your life. Even though we don't always understand what that looks like, we just know that there's this yearning on the inside that shows us something's coming, just get ready, right?
Yeah, I think 2022 was definitely a year of ending cycles and patterns for yourself. At least that's what I did for sure. And it was very freeing and revolutionary almost, because it was like, oh, that pattern's finally done. And this pattern is finally done. And they came in a group of patterns. Like you couldn't just end just one thing. You had to end like several things. And so yeah, it was.
Yeah. I love it. And we haven't gotten to specifics as how, like what you did that time off or how it worked and what you felt. And I think that for people that are going to be transitioning into that, I mean, I love for us to be transparent and kind of share with them, there is some struggle sometimes. But when you feel like you have to pull away, I don't know, for me, it felt like things weren't feeding my soul anymore. Like I was just hungry. And the food that was being given to me wasn't really like taking care of the need that I had, right? So it's not to say that, things don't work, but for me, I just needed something more sustainable, right? Like I didn't want the temporary relief. I'm sure you're familiar with this, like a little occult comment, like, oh, you should do this modality. You should go get, nothing against any modality, but everything that people would recommend, it was kind of like a temporary thing, like, oh, like, and although they're awesome, like, oh, sound bath or food zoning or go see a psychic, or like, it just felt like that food wasn't feeding me, right? Like, I just wanted something from the inside. So I want to share with everybody that if you don't know what it's like to go on the inside and search for some stuff, it is fun. It is a scavenger hunt. At times, I know you and I have discussed, it's a little frustrating, but it's something that you get to literally hunt for your own food, and it's sustainable because you start acquiring the skills to learn how to do that. So can you share a little bit about your journey this past year? And yes, you mentioned a little about how you had to let go of a couple of things, but where were your ache and pains, and where were like the realizations where you knew you just couldn't go back anymore?
Well, I think it started with, so there were certain things that I thought I needed in order to thrive in life. And I literally had to go through the physicalness of them. Like I started a different business with a partner. That was one of the things I thought I needed a partner, or I wanted a partner, which it was fantastic, when it lasted, but it quickly came to an end. And the reason is because we both probably were finishing up cycles. And so, there was all of that, creating another business, which I'm used to creating businesses. That's what I've done my whole entire life, which that wasn't really a problem. And the other thing was the physicalness of it, like literally moved me from being stuck in my own pattern of, I don't even know what to call it. It was just such a weird thing. It was like I was stuck in laziness, or that's what it felt like, but it really wasn't that, because, I'm constantly busy, but there was a pattern of stuck in this lazy, not really being fed, and not seeking out things that did feed me either. That was part of the cycling. And just sort of like drifting through, I want to say, just sort of drifting through life until like this year. Like really, that's what it felt like. It was just weird. It was real weird. And it was very, I think I had to keep busy, like super busy, in order to get through the emotional portion of that, though. So sometimes we think that, our emotions are what we need to talk about. We need to dive deep into them. But sometimes we've already dove into them and we just need to flush them out of our system.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Like, yes, dive and then flush. Because
Yeah.
we think we have to swim with them. It's like, no, don't swim.
No.
Let them go. It's dirty water, I love it. And, a lot of times you and I talk about all the time that as leaders, people think that we don't go through human emotions or that, we're just so strong and nothing phases us. But I think that many times we kind of just retreat. We treat to figure out what's happening, because the responsibility of helping lead other people and making sure that we're first honoring our own journey to make sure that we're okay when we start helping people through theirs, But you're right. Like, there was a lot of distractions. And it's funny how we were just talking last week. I'm like, oh my gosh, I started a business too. And I've done it before. Like, so it's so similar. And like the things that I did, because I thought I needed to like find something, because I found life was like very boring. Like, it was just redundant. At one point I found like the movie Groundhog Day, where I was getting up and I'm like, wait a minute, I lived this day already. And I found that I didn't find anything to like be excited about. And I know it sounds weird, and I loved my life, but it just kept saying, wow, like another 5 years of this, another 10 years of that. So it's funny because I know I kept like hearing you, right? Like, we hadn't spoken forever. And I'm like, I gotta call Angela. Like, I have to call her. Like, we're supposed to do something. And of course, you and I didn't know what the heck it was. And one day I had a dream and I called you. I'm like, hey, I'm having a really weird moment right here. And so it's funny, before I even called, I text you. I'm like, hey, can you talk? You're like, yep. Like, you already knew I was going to call. Like, it was time. Okay. Get out of your little tents, your huts, whatever. Like, it's time to do something wonderful, So I was super excited because I love working with you, and I love all the mentorship that you provided for me, the mentoring that you provided, and the mentorship that you continue to provide. So we want to start like this awesome podcast, right? You've come into some new information and you've shared with me, and I felt like it was definitely aligned with what I had to do. And so now we're here sharing a little bit about the experience from start to actually not just start to finish, but the journey of, because we're still on this particular journey. And we figured, like, if we're going through it right now, why not open the doors and see who else wants to see what's happening, and who would have questions and would want to share also if they're experiencing any awesomeness at this time. So I'm super excited. Even though I have no idea what this is going to look like, just the emotions I get from thinking about it is enough to like make me feel like, yay, something's shifting and changing. So I'm excited.
Yes. Yeah. I think that that's part of the whole thing, is like, we can feel the excitement, right? And going through that sort of dead space, I want to call it, of, and it was quite a long time, but yet knowing that I had to go through that in order to get to this place of, ending all those patterns and all those things that I thought I needed in my life, and actually aspiring into this sort of, oh my God, here we are, we're finally here kind of energy. And it's like, oh yes, let's do this. But it's totally different than what I had expected, which I think that's part of all of last year, was like getting rid of the expectations and just being dull, like literally dull, so that you don't take anything into this new sort of, I don't even know what to call it, like a new paradigm that we're moving into. And so, yeah, so you sort of have to go through that dull space, I want to say. And I feel like that's part of the imprinting, or at least releasing of the imprinting in our cellular DNA of the past, like everything that we've done in the past, because you cannot take any of that kind of information and those patterns and those experiences into, if we literally are shifting our consciousness, you cannot take that into the new consciousness, because you're just repeating the same old thing. It's just a bit of an upgrade for it. Yeah. And that's not where we're headed. That is totally not where the consciousness of humanity is going.
Oh my gosh. And stay tuned, because she's going to share a bunch of awesomeness right now. Oh my, stay tuned. Hold on. here's what's fun. Like you had mentioned, it's different. So this feels different, but it's not a different like Christmas where you get a new toy and you're excited, right? Like every other time that we've had to shift and change and grow and heal, right? It's an exciting, like, wow, a new, okay, my dog's here hanging out. It's one of those things where like, wow, life is really going to change. Like, it's not like a temporary thing. It's not like a Christmas, like a gift you get and you like for like a week and then you get bored, right? But there's a whole new world, a whole new consciousness, a whole new, like, what's the word to use? It's just crazy. We'll find out in a minute, but there's a whole new something, a brand new world, literally, that we're going to start creating. And let's dive into that, what that looks like, Angela. Like we were talking about the 22nd dimension and activations, and it's not 5D, it's 22D. And it's like, what the heck is that? Like, how do we go from 5 to 22? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So let's dive into that so people know what we're going to start talking about to get them ready for the information we're going to be sharing.
So literally, we've already done 5D through 7D, all the way through 12D, I want to say. And we have to think about our past as a human race or human races, like Atlantis, Lemuria, the dinosaur ages, all of those kinds of things. We've already tried these other dimensions, like, and there's a lot of hype out there that says, oh, we're moving into 5D, but really we've already tried 5D. And the physics of fifth dimensional living has already been corrupted, and it really won't work for, if we really want to change, if we really want humanity to change and become more maybe unified or more compassionate towards each other, so that we don't have these extreme dualities that we have now, that we can still have the dualities, but maybe there's a portion or a good portion of humanity that sort of agrees upon a certain way of treating each other, of living, of literally thriving, not just surviving. In the survival periods of humanity, those extreme dualities, like that's where those belief systems became realities. And that's how we just basically survived. And we've been doing that up until now, like literally surviving. There hasn't been thriving, even with the new inventions that we've had, all the technology and everything. Those are just pathways of survival.
Yeah. And that's what it's felt like in the past. So it's funny because people who are hearing might be like, wait a minute, what do you mean 5D? So there is a lot of hype around 5D. Oh my gosh, 5D. And people would always think it was kind of a place, but then people know it's a state of being. It's a consciousness, right? And I remember describing it to somebody like, okay, let's just pretend 3D, everything hurts you and you're bothered by everything and everything's everybody else's fault, right? And I also describe it as like you're going on a flight and you can have a personal item, a carry-on, and you can check bags. And then 5D was a place where like, yeah, no check bags. Like you got to handle your stuff. You got to heal. You can't take it with you. It looks totally different, right? So then when you started throwing 22nd dimension around, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, hold on. How are we going to start describing this? So I want to kind of go back a little bit, because I know that for many who haven't heard or don't understand what this whole thing is about, us coming and helping shift humanity, is that the earth has been wiped several times, right? Like they have been, hey, go help earth get it together, do what you have to do. And then if they don't get it, we're going to just wipe them and start over again. So I know that a couple of years ago, we were talking about like, oh gosh, we have to do our work so we don't get wiped this time. It's like, all this work we come to do, and we're trying to help the humans and we just don't get it. So I remember asking you last week, we're talking, and I'm like, well, if they know we're not going to figure it out, like, why do they keep making us start over again? And why do we keep coming to help? And I remember you saying, well, just the humans don't get it. I'm like, yeah, but they know that already. So I don't understand. So I didn't understand, or I couldn't connect how we've already tried 5D, 6D, 10D, whatever D, right? And now boom, 22 is going to happen. I said, Angela, how is that the case? And your answer was, they finally found something that may work. But before we jump in there, we have to go through, like, I'm not going to call it a purification process, but it sounds like that when you describe it, right? Like it kind of is like, you can't go in there contaminated with your old belief systems, your baggage, your blaming, your trauma or whatever. Like you are literally going to go into a whole new dimension where things are going to be sustainable. And you kept using the word unification, and that they're going to be like councils you mentioned that are going to make sure that they kind of strategize everything. So this is going to be the way we actually shift humanity, that things are created. You mentioned a new central sun. You mentioned Earth Gate. So we're going to go into all that. But I kind of want to give everybody like a backstory of like everything has already been tried. And because time travel is real, because time doesn't exist, and because time isn't linear, there have been experimentation where people are hopping around and kind of figuring out, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And they're going to come back, or they're coming back and giving us information like shortcuts and say, if you're ready and willing to, come this way. And talk a little more about that, because I know I just kind of touched a little bit on it. And then also the Earth Gates and the central Earth. And what exactly does it mean when there's a new Earth being created? Because many have heard, 5D and the new Earth, whatever, but there's a lot of personal belief systems, I feel, that have been like kind of instilled in that. And it's gotten kind of blurry, and it just feels super old to me for some reason. So let's pick it apart.
Okay. So let's take Atlantis, for example. Like that was definitely a 7D consciousness, where we were playing. They were playing with the physics. So we have to start thinking in computer coding kind of thing, like literally computer coding, because that will help us sort of define and delineate the whole process here. So if we're actually energy, and energy is coded with certain X's and O's, let's say, then those dimensions that hold those X's and O's, they hold a certain sequence or a pattern, let's call it, that gets imprinted into the cellular structure of anyone who lives here on Earth or any other place, but we're taking Earth, for example. So our DNA is coded with those patterns. And out of those patterns come experiences. And through those experiences, we either love it or we hate it. We either have fear about it or we're like, yeah, let's do this. Right. And so those are the two, one's an X, one's an O. That's the whole duality of it. And so through the processes of these experiences, like Atlantis, for example, where we were playing with this new sort of intuitive, like being able to read and understand other people, for example, that was part of Atlantis. There was different technology of space travel, like physically, like Star Wars or Star Trek, where they literally beamed you someplace else, like that was being played with. There was all those kinds of, like the things that we saw in the 60s on TV, like those were things that were being played out in Atlantis. And what happened was domination and control was in there, because we live in a world of duality that will never be taken away from us. But people got greedy with domination and control, and it ended up being a wipeout instead of a progression. So this time when we're exploring raising consciousness or doing a wiping again, because Earth can't literally handle us here any longer. If we're going to continue down this path, we're just going to literally blow it up, because we're using all of its resources, and we're terrible with Earth. Earth doesn't belong to us, but we think it does, and we're destroying it. And so this time it's like, okay, well, we don't really want to take away duality, because that's part of the human experience. And we don't want to take away free will, again, part of the human experience, but free will is not a stabilizer in a world of duality. So if we don't have a stable consciousness, right? Because free will is the one that determines if it's a good consciousness or a bad consciousness. If we don't have a stabilized energy of free will, then, we have all of these domination, manipulation, control factors, which is what we're playing out again now. And so we're all here at this very bitter end almost. And so what we've done, what 22nd dimension does, is it stabilizes free will. It says, okay, you can have free will, but we're going to put it in this X and this O. And this is your expansion of free will. It can't be everything, because societies can't handle it. You're using domination and control factors to go outside of those. And those have always been manipulated. Like that's the whole 5D, 7D, 10D. They have always been able to manipulate them before. Well, now we have safeguards from the 22nd dimension, because there are, because that's what 22nd dimension is. It's a safeguard kind of a dimension where you can imprint the X's and O's to this extent, but it can't be manipulated, changed beyond that.
Right.
Does that make
Perfect.
sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I love how you use safety guards, because it's not like your free will is going to be like squished in, like you have free will, but not really, right? So let's just say people's level of conviction, right? It's all over the place.
Right.
For someone, it might be okay to throw a piece of trash out the window when they're driving. And for somebody, it's like, oh my gosh. So if you leave it up to our own conviction or our own free will, it's a huge scale, right? So that's what you're saying. It's kind of a huge scale. So now this 22nd dimension, they're kind of bringing it in a little closer, where it's not so broad. And it's kind of like, hey, this is like our amazing theme park, amazing world. And in order for you to come here, these are the requirements, right? They're going to be given for you to even come into our amazing world, right? So when we say it like that, it's kind of, oh, only cool people get to come in. Yeah, only people who have done the work, who get it, who are wanting to shift humanity in a way. So literally creating a place where everybody is safe. There is no power, control, or whatever, but because we all have this mutual understanding that we're going to just be united, right? That we just want this awesome place for people to live in. And we see movies around this stuff all the time, right? And it's kind of like, it makes sense that they would have already explored and experimented in so many ways, and they found something that works. But in order to keep it clean, keep it happy, keep it magical, we can't just let anybody in, right? And I love that we're going to be talking about this on this podcast, like different things that we can start teaching people about different topics to be like, hey, let's get ready, right? It's like packing for a trip or getting ready to go to university. There's a whole bunch of guidelines that you're gonna have to meet, and requirements and prerequisites or whatever. And it's like, you know what? At the end of the day, I'm game. If it means that I'm going to get to a 22nd dimension where there's unification and all this power and control crap is done, and we can all just get along literally, like, sign me up for it. Where do I go? What do I do? Right? And so I love that there's going to be kind of like a step-by-step, even though everybody's different and the journey is customized, there is going to be a way to get there, and you don't have to figure it out on your own. Like, there's going to be support. Angela and I are going to work on helping you guys figure yourselves out, because that's what you have to do first. You got to figure yourself out.
Yeah. The other beautiful component about having a stable free will is that you can actually do real creation in a stabilized free will, where you can't, we have not had real creation in this experience prior because of the extreme dualities. And we don't have, so that's one of the things that's I'm just like, yes, let's do this, because we can actually do creation things in a stabilized environment. Otherwise, you're just in chaos all the time. And yes, you can organize chaos to a certain extent, but I think we've done that. Like, we've tried to organize it as much as we possibly can here, but without a stable structure, like, the house is going to fall. Right?
For sure.
And that's where we've been. And I think that that's the part of the creation component that I'm here for creation. That is part of the creation component that's always been missing. And when we're in a stabilized dimension that literally holds, your freedom, that's really what free will is. It's your ability to feel free, but it has to be stable.
Right.
So, yeah. Then humans can actually really move into creation, like real creation, not just, another computer chip.
Yeah, it's so cute. Like when you're mentioning like real creation, like as you're saying that, I'm getting a vision of like somebody just buying a house, like, okay, I can work with this. It's got good bones. And you're not creating, you're literally remodeling. Mm-hmm. And that's what it felt like we're here, like, okay, work with this. And you're like, what the heck? Like, what do I do? Okay, I gotta knock down some walls, I gotta hang some curtains. So it has felt like that in this lifetime for me, right? And in this lifetime, I felt like I've already lived like 50 different lifetimes, but it hasn't everyone felt like this is what you have, remodel it, tear down walls or whatever. But this talk about, the 22nd dimension, it really feels like brand new sketch pad, paper, pencil, whatever, all the fun colors. And we have this amazing creativity that's just coming out of our ears. And someone's asking us, what would you do with it? And we're starting from scratch. Well, not necessarily from scratch, from the experiences we've already had. And we can create that into something very beautiful. And so the opportunity to do that, even though we don't really know, again, what lies ahead as far as, struggles or whatever detours, it doesn't matter. It's worth it. It's worth being able to create something brand new and something sustainable and something amazing. So I'm really looking forward to that. So you've had some help in helping getting activated into getting ready to start the journey of transitioning into the 22nd dimension. So as far as your body, your mind, your spirit, what have you been feeling prior to these activations, during, and then after? Like, walk us through what you've been going through.
So it's very so in third dimension, when you have a really profound experience, there's a time after that profoundness where you just feel like you're not motivated, like there's just blankness there. It's literally called the void in third dimension. And it can be like a horrible place to be, especially if you have patterns that are running, and you are constantly trying to operate through those patterns. That space of void can be it can be almost torturous. I'm going to just put it out there. It can be almost torturous.
Thank you for the honesty.
Well, let's just be real here.
Right.
For me, it was very torturous, and I spent a whole year in there, and it was like, it was like I really just wanted to be insane. I think I probably was. I'm not sure. It was the loneliest place I've ever been in my entire life. But here, with this activation, like my body feels extremely clean. And I've been doing work for years, healing up any wounds, ancestral wounds, like early childhood wounds, really changing my perception about all of those kinds of things and activating myself as much as I possibly could. What I noticed about this activation is the body, like how light the body is. And I've spent a good portion of my life like not even in my body, because to do the things that I do, like being really grounded into my body, would just be more patterns that I would have to figure out and work through.
Right.
And so yeah, I've spent a good portion of my life half in and half out. Well, this, I feel probably, the only word that associates to this experience is grounded, but I feel like I'm actually a body, having some type of an experience. But there's not pain with this body. There's not old patterns. Like I can see, I can psychically see, and I cannot see patterns any longer. I don't feel like I'm half in and half out any longer. So there's a stability here that I've never experienced in a third dimensional experience ever. So that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed. The other thing that's starting to, so what happens is, like, when we're doing this activation, like the body has to completely it gets an entirely new blueprint in the cellular structure. And that, because we live in a third dimensional human factor, it takes a bit of time for the body to sort of catch up. So I've been really paying attention to, alkalining the body, paying attention to what kind of thoughts that I allow to manifest but there's not much thought. That's one of the other thing is there really isn't a whole lot of thought. But the thought, when it is, it's profound thought, like this kind of conversation type of things. Right. Like it's profoundness. It's like, oh, wait, we don't do that any longer. We're over here now. Emotionally, like it's very stable. Like I always worked hard on not reacting and just sort of responding, but I don't have even reaction hardly at all any longer, which is great. And I, you would think something when somebody would say something or something happened, you would think something in your head and it would be like, oh my gosh, why would we do that? I don't even have that any longer. It's just like, oh, okay, well, let's fix that so that we can move on, So there's those kinds of things. The other thing that's the intuition is like completely off the chart. Like if, I do soul readings for people and stuff like that, and it's so spot on. And like, it's like instant, it happens before they even ask the question, which it kind of did before, but it would be, I'd have to work through things, or I'd have to work through their patterns, use a language where their pattern would understand it. Now it's just like, I'm just going to blurt this out here and I'm going to activate you. And let's get rid of those old patterns, because that's not serving you. That's not what you want. It's not what you're telling me that you want. So let's just, let's flush it out.
Yeah, let's just delete. A lot of flushing and deleting. And I love how you share, like, I remember you and I were talking. So for those of you that don't know, like, Angela held a class, like 2 or 3 years ago, that was DNA activation and a lot of cell memory. So we do have cell memory, muscle memory, all that good stuff. So there's prints that came from past lives, and we keep carrying them on until they're healed. So I remember you hosted a retreat, and there was a few of us there, and you did some DNA activations. And I want to kind of give them a backstory of what that means. So when you see things like new blueprint, old cell memory is gone, you literally were able to figure out how to tap in the DNA to start healing up the old cell memory that is no longer serving us in this present moment, right? And sometimes, of course, it's a very subconscious thing. We don't realize it, but there's wounds that we've carried on. And you even mentioned a few weeks ago, we're talking like galactic wounds, right? And I'm like, what the heck? Like, who would have even thought that, when you say galactic, we just sound all high and mighty, like nothing can touch us, right? Like we're freaking gods and we repel. But you made a comment like, we also have to heal up the galactic wounds. And I'm like, holy, that was just weird to me, right? Because sometimes we think that just because it has a fancy name, that we also didn't experience wounds in that particular lifetime or where we're at dimensionally at this time, right? So to have the ability to go back and to start healing up this DNA, and I had the privilege of helping with my clients do that as well, to teach them how to self-activate and self-heal and talk to these cells, talk to the DNA. Like they talk about us having junk strands of DNA, like they're not junk. They're previous lives and experiences. And what we're doing is helping remember just how powerful we are. So if we're talking, this is 3-4 years ago, and you're teaching us how to do all this stuff, and now stepping into this 22nd, it's kind of like, you literally have to like start all over again. Everything kind of that we've learned from now and go back as far as you'd like, it's going to be, I want to say either, because the word re just doesn't sound right, like either reinvented or reinstalled. No, it literally is going to be no good. You made a comment when we spoke last week. You said, what's happening now is like when we come into this lifetime, right? We came in with a purpose. It's changing into an assignment now. So we have an old blueprint. You came in for XYZ. Guess what? Now you're being activated. All the old things are gone, literally. You are going to be given a new blueprint, new cells, know everything, out with the old, in with the new. And now you're going to be waiting for this assignment. So this is a void that Angela is referring to, like the transitioning between 3D, 5D, whatever D, and now this 22nd unification dimension is like, oh my gosh. So your intuition, I know you had mentioned, like you've always been pretty spot on from the experiences I've had with you. And I know that sometimes you had to mention, like, it's just like kind of in your face. And maybe the hardest part is trying to explain how fast it comes.
Yeah.
But like everything, right? It's like, it's a brand new something. So even if you learn how to fly today, if you wake up and you have the gift of flight, well, you can't just take off without expecting you to crash into some buildings or whatever. So I love the way you've been handling these activations. You're kind of like sitting aside, like, let me play with this new toy first. And I even told her, I said, okay, I'm up. I started getting activated last week, and I've been having really weird symptoms. Like I can't hear, my hearing just goes away. I get a little nauseous, and I've been documenting stuff, just kind of like, okay, let's see how this is going to work. But I told her, I said, okay, well, you go ahead and do the suffering, Angela. You figure it out. So when I go through this, you give me all the shortcuts. And as funny as it sounds, that's how it works. So if Angela goes through this process first, and she's figuring it out, and it's kind of a hit and miss and figuring it out and being in this void, I'm setting the intention that when I go through this process, I don't have to suffer as much, and I don't have to experience all the hit and misses. Because I would just watch her and be like, what can I learn from her? So this is why we wanted to get together to talk about it. So when the rest of you go through this, we would have had our beat up sessions or whatever, and would have made it a little more of a smooth transition for the rest of us. But I can't even begin to fathom. And we've shared conversations about what this is like, what you're feeling, but I'm so excited, even though I don't even know, like, again, what to expect, but just being, what a huge privilege it is to have the opportunity presented to be like, hey, literally, this is what we've come for. And now there's an actual way of getting things done. So I'm super excited about that. How are you sleeping? How are you feeling? How are you eating? Like, your physical body is going through any weird changes, or have you felt very minimal interruption as far as, your sleeping patterns or just your way of being?
Yeah, it's pretty minimal for me. There were a couple nights, I want to say, where I was wide awake, but that's not really unusual for me either. Like, I sort of, sometimes I'm awake, sometimes I'm not. It's just sort of, it's just a weird, it's just, my sleep has never been normal.
It keeps it exciting. It keeps it exciting.
Yeah, it does. Sure. The thing that I want to say that's probably been the hardest is trusting the process, because I've in 3D, when I want something or manifested something, I would just state it, and pretty soon, within a couple of hours, it would be there. This, what I keep hearing, or what I kept hearing up until a couple of days ago, was that I had so much cellular damage from previous experiences that it took longer to activate them or recode them or code them into this new blueprint, or get them ready to even accept a blueprint. Because, so many wounds, whatever. And so that's probably been the hardest, is trusting how long it's only been a couple of weeks. What am I talking about? It's really only been a couple of weeks, but that's probably been the hardest, that trust, the self-trust, trusting the process, and trusting that you're on the right track, because it's been a bit empty, not really empty. It's not empty like it is in the third dimension. It's, what happens is I can feel that I'm in a space of a different conscious level. Like the central sun, for example, in this 22nd dimension, we can't use our old central sun because that's based in duality, and the extremes of duality. So there's actually a new central sun. And so I literally had to heal enough of my cellular structure so that I could align with that central sun. Now, before, in third dimension, I would go through the central sun to get to any planet outside of our solar system here. So Vega, for example, which is in the system of Lyra, like, I would go through the central sun to get there. No problem. I already have, experience there. Here, there's a whole different solar system. It's a whole different star system. And so it's like, I don't see anything. And the symbols are different. So you have to change the way that you think. You have to change the language that you use. There's a lot more symbols here than there is in third dimensional frequencies. And so there's that, like, I'm just getting used to, and sort of being able to identify those kinds of things. The visions, I can tell you that the visions of what the new blueprint is going to allow for me intuitively are like it happened yesterday, and it's happening right now, and it's like I'm literally working through the process of it. So you can literally, like, that's exciting for me. Like, I can literally see what's happening within my body that's changing. Like, right now they're working on my eyes, because there's something about being able to see through like an X-ray vision kind of thingy, because I've always been a seer, and now it's upgrading, I guess. And so they're working on my eyesight, and they're like I don't wear my glasses hardly at all, and like all different kinds of things that are happening. But it's like you can not only feel it and know it, but you can actually see yourself working through the process, and it's amazing and fun. But that whole trust factor, like especially the first 3 to 5 days, was like, what's really happening here? Because there was a lot of like, I don't understand anything here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny, as exciting as it could be. And some people are listening and probably like, oh my gosh, I would be excited about doing work. Like, you don't understand. Like, it's something to do, people. There's no void. It's excitement. It's not boring, but it's funny. It is so true. Like, even though you're ready for it. And I love it because you're going through the process of like this detox, the old or whatever. The same thing we talked about is how if you're going to want to come in, you have to do some work. And this is what's so lovely. Like, you were ready to do this work of, okay, let me go ahead. I've tried everything else. I've done everything else. I've done the healing that I know to do myself. Now talk to me, right? But you do have to get ready for this, because even though it's exciting, I remember you had mentioned me, Betty, you have to trust yourself more than ever when you go through this experience, because you feel not lost. Loss is in the world. It's just unfamiliar. And so when it's unfamiliar, like, when we work with clients, it's like, okay, intuition comes in, visions, whatever we're saying. But if something's being transitioned, if you're being upgraded, right? If you're being activated, it's kind of like, you're walking somewhere, but there's no handrail. You have to like actually go within and hold on to that handrail and be like, you know what? I'm going to trust the process. And it sounds so easy to say, trust the process. But if you go through the steps that Angela and I are going to share with you, like the self-love, the trusting yourself, the forgiving yourself, like we're going to be talking about a bunch of topics in each episode, but we're literally going to walk you through. So when you get to the point of, you will trust yourself, you will know, you're going to be okay with, not being familiar with the situation you're in, but the willingness to be able to walk through and say, you know what, I'm going to show up for myself anyway. And we don't all just wake up and get there, right? There's actually steps that we take to get there. And that's the beauty of it. You won't be by yourself, right? Like, I'm kind of like, Angela, how are you doing? Like, I'll check in on Angela, but she's pretty much doing this by herself.
Pretty much.
So there will be some not hand holding, but there will be some like, hey, hear my voice, go to the right. You're getting warmer, getting colder, whatever. But it's lovely to have had somebody walk before us to be like, hey, I'm coming, it's dark. And Angela will be like, just hear the sound of my voice, right? And more importantly, listen to your voice. So a lot of us don't know how to listen to our voice. We don't know how to listen to our intuition. I remember when Angela was teaching me a few years ago, and she'd be like, well, your intuition is you. I'm like, well, what do you mean? She goes, no, it's you. And I'm like, what do you mean it's me? And she goes, the first thing you think, that's what it is. I'm like, I don't understand. And I was so complicating everything because we're taught that everything has to be so difficult. And that's another belief system that we're going to tear down, because it's not difficult. The fact of the matter is that things are so simple that we have a hard time believing that they could be simple. So we make ourselves go crazy thinking about 10 different things when it was literally the first thing that you thought. So that's the whole learning to trust yourself, right? Going through all these, like her and I had sat down last week and we're like, okay, what would we talk about? And literally we wrote down 29 topics. We decided like last week in a couple of minutes, like, oh my gosh, it should be a podcast. Oh my gosh, we need to write a book. Oh my gosh, we need to be like whatever, right? Mind you, we're still going through the process of the activations and everything, right? But our minds are going.
Right.
We gotta do it for everybody. It's great. But it was so funny because we're talking and I'm just randomly writing down topics. We're saying things out loud. And then by the time we were done with our conversation, we had 29 topics. And I honestly believe we just scratched the surface, Angela, because there's so much information. And I'm excited to know that we are going to have like just not just the emotion of excitement, right? Because we're not going to just say, okay, we're excited and that's it. There's so many other things that are going to come alongside of us to help support this journey and to like populate this beautiful 22nd dimension. And I honestly have been having dreams about it, Angela. Like I've been getting, and I wake up super happy. And I'm a happy person. I'm super grateful. But the past few days, I've been getting some really weird activation symptoms where I mentioned like my ears. Last Saturday, like I don't get sick. That's not a norm for me. And my body was hurting so much. And I thought about like, what the heck is this? And I'm like, okay. Thank you for the activation. I'm going to ask for activation with grace and ease, only feel what I need to feel. It's not that serious, right? So even then I started getting demanding, like, I don't want to feel all this craziness. Like, I really think it was my body of saying, hey, my body's way of saying something's happening. And I'm like, okay, thank you for the memo. And then as soon as I acknowledged it, the aches and pains started going away. So even then you can request how smooth you want this transition to go. But it is about knowing yourself so well that you know that you have a right to do that. Because I remember a while back, Angela, I was asking for something and you're like, why not? Then ask for whatever you want. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to be greedy. And you mentioned something like you're here to do humanity a favor. So everything and anything you want, you can totally request. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And now I believe that with all my heart, like if I'm here to help shift humanity, I want to be able to do all these things. And all of a sudden, like, especially after our trip to Peru, like all of a sudden, everything I wanted, I just started asking because I had a process while I was there as well. But I started asking, and literally I felt like somebody was saying, what else would you like? What else would you like? Like they were taking my order.
Yeah.
And it was because I started believing that that was my truth,
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't have to suffer, that I did get to ask for whatever I needed, because in return, I was going to use it to help humanity anyway, right? Like I remember being in Peru and being so upset. And I said, fine, if I'm going to be here and help humanity, because I'm pissed off at this trip, right? A lot of stuff happened that triggered me, like you would not believe. I'm not an angry person, but oh my gosh, was I angry? And I said, fine. If I'm going to stay here and help the humans, I want to release all this weight. I want to travel and I don't want to ever worry about money, right? So like 2 months later, ding, 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 things just started happening. And I just made demands and I'm like, all of a sudden I release all this weight. I'm like, money's coming here. I'm traveling there. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I just need to position myself to receive.
Yes.
And so I think that's going to be a whole episode in itself where we're going to teach you how to be ready to receive, ready to receive change, activation, healing, worthiness, value, because even if you want it, you guys, some of us don't know how to receive it. So you're not positioning yourself to receive it.
Receiving is not a natural code for humanity because that was shut down right at the beginning in first dimension. Like literally, it was that whole coding was shut down so that actually first dimensional beings couldn't receive because that started the whole forgetting.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it makes perfect sense because anytime that conversation comes up, people cringe. Like people cringe. This morning, I went to go visit a friend and she lives by this man that bakes really good Mexican sweetbread. So, I had to stop, right? So I'm stopping and he has this abundance of bread everywhere. And he's, you know what? I don't sell all my bread, but I have a bunch of breads because I'm ready to receive the customers that come. He goes, what happens if I don't bake all the bread, like my variety of bread, and somebody comes and asks for it and I don't have it? And it just kind of triggered a story. And I want to share with you guys. I had a friend maybe like 8 years ago, and she had businesses very wealthy. You couldn't tell because she was a very humble person, very modest. But I remember at that point, I would ask God in the universe, like, oh my gosh, help me to just pay my bills. Like, I just want to be able to pay my bills every month, right? And that was kind of my attitude. And then I would make just enough. We would make just enough to cover our mortgage or whatever. And then I wouldn't have anything extra. And then she said one day, she goes, Neha, she goes, if you need 50 cents, ask God in the universe to give you $1.50. I'm like, oh my God, I was so offended by it. What do you mean? She goes, do you think that the universe and God takes money or anything away from somebody else to give to you? She goes, no, he has an overflowing abundance of it. So if you need more, ask for more. And that was the biggest, hugest lesson that triggered the heck out of me. And I find that it's with many of us, like, and I'm glad you said that because I had no clue that I was taken away because it doesn't come natural to receive.
No.
It's awkward for many people. Yeah, we can look at that, just take it. But it's not a natural human reaction to just be okay with receiving. So when Angela, I talk about, like abundance or whatever, like for us now it's supernatural. It's like, what do you want? Like, okay, I don't really need more money. I don't really whatever. Like we're so abundant in our way of thinking now that it took training to get to, right? Mm-hmm. That I want all of us to be here. I want all of us to know that even if it's not a code that's naturally giving, dang it, we want to get those codes and get activated right now.
Heck yes. Well, plus we have all these belief systems, these beliefs, that we shouldn't ask for more, and that's greedy. And, but it's an abundant universe. I mean, and God is an abundant being, right? Like the whole conscious, like how these belief systems ever got started is way beyond me, but we need to get rid of them because they do not serve anyone or anything. Well, let me correct. They do serve domination, control, and manipulation. And they serve it well. I mean, that's what they're based on. And who are the ones who are thriving and have all the abundances are the ones who dominate and control you and me.
Yeah.
I mean, so it serves them, but it serves no one else. And that's not who humanity is. We aren't here to be a hierarchy. Like that whole conceptualization, again, is not a natural way for humanity to live. We aren't here for a hierarchy. Like, who ever thought about that? So it's all these things. It's like, oh my gosh, how did these things ever get started? Well, it's got started through not having a stable structure for chaos. That's exactly how it got started.
Oh my gosh. And I love that you mentioned that. Who wants to be a chaos coordinator, right? Like, why bother in that? Like, create your own stuff, coordinate something brand new. I have people say, oh, I'm really good with like stress. It's like, why? Why would you want to be okay with stress? Stress, period, right? But again, it comes from our old way of thinking. And I love how you mentioned, like, we don't know where it came from. I think that at the level when you've done like so much healing, you don't care anymore. I don't care how it's created. I'm not going to go back and investigate. That's just a waste of time, money, and energy. I don't want to do it anymore. What do I do moving forward? Right? And that's where all of us are. What serves you, what doesn't serve you? And let's start from there. Let's start creation there. We don't have to be in the 22nd dimension to start creating right now. Like, let's start practicing now. When you get there, it's literally second nature, right? When the people that are thriving, you mentioned the ones that have this control, you can thrive if you're in control of yourself. So maybe control isn't such a horrible thing as long as it's self, right? You can control your thoughts, your actions, all that stuff. You totally have the ability to control those things. So the only thing you need is a how-to, right? And there's a bunch of shortcuts because a lot of us have been there, done that. And we gladly want to teach you guys how to do that. So we all can be in this place together, right? And, you know, being alone is not a horrible thing. I know the time I spent alone, like there was many times where I wanted to reach out to the people, but it was so much about going in and finding you and knowing you and trusting you. And now I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, like I'm out of that place. But there's an awesome component to being able to just kind of retreat and do your thing, but to be able to share it with people and to come along other people and say, hey, let's do it together, because we're not really meant to be alone. We're meant to be together, you know. And Angela and I were talking about putting retreats together to start implementing all these things and to start bringing all these like-minded, like-hearted people together and say, okay, you guys, there's a greater strength in numbers. Let's just do it.
Right. We have to do it.
We have to do it. It's just a thing. We have to do it. You see how
we have to do it. It's creation. We got to do it.
Yeah, creation. Lovely. So many architects, designers, painters, everything. Everybody's welcome. Let's do this together. Let's create. Let's love. Let's have fun. Let's heal together, because it's much more exciting that way. So I'm super excited about what we're doing here.
Me too.
All right. So what do you think, Angela? We'll get together once a week and get these episodes going for everybody?
For sure. Yes.
Love it. All right. Let's sign off then. Thank you guys for being here today. We love you guys. Super excited to share more. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Thank you for being with us today. To find out more about Angela, please visit her website at www.angelablaha.com. And to find out more about Villia, visit her website at www.coachvillia.com.